Welcome back, folks. Today we're going to finally talk about Crimson Desert, a new upcoming single-player open-world action-adventure from Pearl Abyss, a South Korean studio and developers of Black Desert Online, an MMO that I've played for a bit, not that much, but I have a friend who is crazy for it and she showed me a bunch of endgame features and gameplay, so I was able to get the picture of that title as she was explaining it to me. So in this video we will be going through what we know so far and what you can expect from the game itself. I'm also going to go from what developers have released. I know there have been, videos posted by people who got to play the game early, but it's not ethical for me to watch them and then basically recite what they said in this video. So basically here I'm going from what Pearl Abyss have shown and talked about, and there is a lot here. Also, initially Crimson Desert was supposed to be a prequel MMO to Black Desert Online, but they have decided to pivot into the single-player experience, and you will be able to recognize some elements of it, specifically with the amount of content and gameplay features planned, which when you put them into this, means a lot of stuff to discover and regions to explore. Story-wise, from what we know, Crimson Desert will take us into the world of Pywell, an open-world map that we will be able to freely explore, do missions and quests how we please, and through it discover what dangers lurk as we interact with different factions, fight various monsters including humans and non-humans, but also search for many secrets that will give us treasures and items to buff our character skills, different types of weapons, and not just, fight stuff, but go through platforming elements and other types of puzzles that will be incredibly well hidden, so you as a player have to think how to solve them, because ultimately all of that will be, aiding you in your main quest as your character becomes stronger. The main protagonist is called Cliff, who is a member of Greymanes, and at the start of the title we can see that Greymanes and Black Bears will be engaged in a full-blown war after apparently a peace treaty was broken. Now in the 50-minute gameplay video they have released, it seems that's where the attack occurs, and basically that's going to be a start of the game, and as a survivor we will venture out into the world, to solve a bunch of the problems, including our own. Joining us on that adventure as we obviously progress through the game, we will have Unka and Damien, side characters that we can play as and do their own activities or, their side missions as I understood. But for the main part of the story, Cliff will be the one to play through it. It also seems there is also another character called Jan, but as I have read, people are still not sure if he is going to be playable. And throughout marketing and media that Pearl Abyss has shared, the main focus at least was on these three, but again that's, I'm going from what I know so far. I do like the idea of having different characters. As we see, they're going to utilize different styles of combat, including weapons they have at their disposal, from two-handed swords, guns, pistols, to Cliff having, by default of course, his sword and shield, but as in many other games you will be finding better stuff to equip. The map itself is going to be open world and will be divided into 5 different regions, or biomes if you want to call them that way, and each one will have its own backstory and sort of what people inhabit them, starting with Hennard, which is the heart of the continent, with high fantasy setting, noble houses and so on. It's also going to be the starting location of our adventure. Then we have Pyloon, which is in the northernmost region and is the homeland of us, the Greymanes, with lush snowy mountains and a very distinct way of these buildings with these red colors, because I guess they're going to be using that maybe from the trees, or maybe that's just culture wise how they like their stuff, but in any case it looks beautiful. Then we have Demenis being the center of Pywell's political and military stage. Looks very nice, I must say, and I think this is going to be kinda cool to see what sort of dynamics these factions are gonna be playing and how we're gonna be involved in all of that. Now Delicia being the region at the forefront of science and technology. So if you have been looking at the gameplay they have released, there will be mechs in the game, so I assume that place, we will fight them. As well, we're gonna be able to use one to our own advantage, which was interesting to see. And the fifth one is Crimson Desert, hence the name of the game. But this area is mentioned to be an arid expanse of red sands and lawlessness, so honestly, it's one that I'm really excited about, being that, well, there is probably no central power here, so probably different factions and groups fighting each other. I feel it's going to be filled with interesting treasures and just stuff to explore and find. Quests are designed so that with each region you will be doing different stuff for factions, different people, villagers, you know, either taking over fortresses and fighting various types of bandits. So think big battles and political intrigue, which is also going to include various boss fights that we will talk about in the combat section of this video. But also we have seen footage of Cliff actually helping people by driving this cart, so there's probably gonna be some mechanics to it so that the cart doesn't break. To even using these gameplay elements of putting out fire in buildings to rescue this person from the house, that I found very interesting that they're thinking about all of that, because how to tackle different stories and makes things interesting, because in a game that is going to be probably insanely huge and long, you must provide variety so that you don't fall into a trap of just having a few formulas and that's it. Basically, like, every mission is gonna be similar to each other. I think that's not what they want here. So in my book, that's a big plus from what I see here. To traverse these regions, we will have a couple of options. Well, first off, on foot, probably at the start of the game, and after that being horses, and developers in one of their blogs a long time ago said that there will be a huge variety of them, probably varying in speed, strength and just how they look. But later on you will be able to even ride a dragon to go over these huge instances and locations, and I've also seen like Cliff on a bear, of course within that mech as well, so I just hope that the mech will not just be like for a mission or a specific area, but rather something we can take, you know, and have fun out into the world. I mean, but you see, that's not all, as Cliff will be able to get crow wings that we saw as he jumps from this mountain into the ravine, and we can sort of fly around it. Other character like Damien, for example, uses this rotating fan thing to traverse, and I'm glad because they are very distinct in their style. Of course, a lot of that will depend on our stamina system, how we push into it, allowing us probably, you know, glide for longer as games usually do this, but being on foot again is probably how the game will begin, because with all of this unlocking very slowly as we progress through the world and the story, I think that's sort of like what developers want here. You're gonna be starting very slowly to get the hang of the world, and then later on, obviously, as things progress and you unlock more stuff, then you're gonna be able to traverse those things even faster, of course, with the fast travel options as much as I've seen, but you will have to unlock them. Also, in this specific frame, in the skills tab, we see Cliff, Damien and Unka, so these abyss artifacts will act as those points. Again, we find those as we fight, defeat enemies, do quests, going from main and side ones, and going off of the beaten path and solving puzzles. And as someone who enjoys like Piranha Bytes' way of hiding things that can be proven very useful later on throughout the game, I just love this system. No hand guiding in a sense, but actually us looking around, not just in the distance but through various vertical levels and hidden doors and passages. Speaking of our protagonists, they have a very strong cast, with Alec Newman playing Cliff, and for those ones who played Cyberpunk and probably a lot on this channel, he was the voice of Adam Smasher there, alongside Rebecca Hansen playing Damien, and Stuart Scudamore who plays that Unka, an orc that will be a sort of a philosopher but still with that heavy hitting character during combat itself, which is nice to see. Now, speaking of combat, this is probably one of the most important elements in this game, as again they draw a lot from that combat philosophy from Black Desert Online, being fight with, let's say, 10, 15, 20 to 25 enemies at the same time, where hitting one, for example, with brute strength is going to, well, take out even more of them as you push throughout these multiple enemies and opponents, and you will have to really adapt your playstyle so that you can have proper, how would I say, view of that combat field, so you are not surrounded, so you always have to utilize that combat flow. The focus of that combat will be on chaining attacks. That means, as I said, utilizing weapons, skills, elemental attacks, as well as items you find throughout your journey. A while back, developers said that Taekwondo will also play a role, as we have seen Cliff use hand-to-hand combat, including grapples to chain those attacks so that the flow of your, combos means that you will be able to defeat enemies faster. And because there is so much variety here with the freedom they're giving to the player, I feel like this will be one of those games where people, after they get the hang of the game, you will see a bunch of videos, people doing some crazy stuff, different builds, and that's usually a sign that developers did their jobs well. Also, environment plays a role, as I mentioned before, like crow wings will allow us to fly or move around bigger enemies, especially if we have to traverse their attacks, including the spider web, so we can quickly close distances to the enemy and use that momentum to push those combos further. I mean, it goes to the point where you can even sling from a tree into an enemy camp, and I think we can sling from any tree in a sense, kinda wild when you think about it, but honestly a very smart use of environment. Besides the usual enemies, we have seen quite a few boss battles already, including Whitehorn, that is this big beast that utilizes blizzard and fog to quickly go through us with sheer strength, so one has to think a bit and learn from enemy attacks and patterns to see when is the best opening, as well as, move faster. Like we have this devious enemy like the Reed Devil that will use this, reeds to hide and attack from shadows. Then we have Staglord, which will be more of that brute in heavy armor and devastating attacks we must avoid, to a more magic-oriented Hexamarie Witch that again uses deception from which side she is going to attack. One particular and cool boss was the Queen Stoneback Crab that doesn't have that usual HP, but rather very specific spots we have to hit. And because we are pushed really high up into the air, using the crow ability alongside the spider web, or whatever it's going to be called here, I think I saw it's called that, we can quickly close distances and hit those very specific spots, as the game does rely on us climbing some of those monsters, and of course we're gonna be able to climb just different stuff throughout the world, which is very cool. So far, most bosses that they have shown here will have different stages. Most I've seen, at least in the gameplay, is 2, but most importantly for me is that they're not similar in nature. So if a character is done in a certain way, they will utilize their own skills and archetype they have to their advantage, making us adapt into a different attack pattern. So that's what makes things interesting, Later on in new trailers, we have seen some wild flying bosses. I have no idea how this will be done, but from the Pearl Abyss perspective, it is very, very bold. And I like when developers are utilizing verticality to switch things up in the game. I mean, again, you kinda have to. Like, with the game this big, variety is the key to, kinda have players interested to continue playing onwards and onwards. But again, it won't push you to have just, oh well, this or that, but rather you choose what skills you invest in and how you mix and match them in different buffs or items, creating a combat style that fits you as a player. Of course, once the game is out, we will see what different builds people will create, and of course I already have some ideas in my head, but we will leave that for once the game is actually out. Most importantly, after defeating these bosses, as I said, we can use their own abilities as our own. So by the end of the game, you will probably going to experiment a lot and try out different things to see what is gonna be giving you the most amount of damage. I've also heard that there is no difficulty option in this game. You can correct me down below in the comments, but honestly, if they don't have difficulty options, for me that's big. That's a big plus. I like that. Speaking of weapons, they have shown that you will be able to buy new ones, craft them, probably, find some rare ones in those hidden chests and behind secret doors, upgrading them so they increase in power and adding different elements to it. And you will be able to get those through mining, hunting, and so on. It's still very funny to me that they avoid calling this an RPG, where I swear there are games out there that don't even have 10% of these features, yet they call themselves RPG. But hey, who cares? if the game is fun and good, that's all that ultimately matters. A big feature within Crimson Desert will be the camp, where by collecting different resources we can expand it, send people off to find us different stuff I see, and just resources we can use in cooking, for example, as having a good meal during combat will be essential so that we don't lose our HP and we can recover that HP fairly quickly. Throughout footage they have shown, player is constantly using food to their advantage, so later on if you're gonna be fighting tougher monsters it will be a necessity and also make money through the trading itself. But besides that, expanding our camp, aka settlement, is the key for like the game itself, so that we as Greymanes grow in strength and size, because I'm guessing at the start of the game we're pretty much destroyed. And also I am a big fan of these mechanics in general, and I was surprised that Crimson Desert was going into this so heavily, so for me that's a big plus. I mean, I think in general, this game, if you want it to be, of course, will be incredibly long with the amount of stuff they have implemented here, but I think it's necessary so we get a good insight into this world and connect more with it, besides, just doing quests, just that to have that proper immersion. I mean, if you want to take a break and work on a camp or just explore the wilderness, whatever, trade a bit, that's what you can do, so that's a big plus. So bring it on, because by the end of the game, if the game allows it, I will be rich, mark my words. Also, in the camp as well, we're gonna be using different buildings to certain things. For example, we will be able to dye our clothing with honestly a lot of colors and materials. I mean, my beginner's guide for this will probably be 2 hours long, as the more I look at it, the more features I just see here, Some might argue that sometimes too much is too much, but hey, I mean, a lot of this is just side stuff you can technically skip. You don't have to do it, but it's good to actually have it, and it's good because it's probably going to make your character stronger with the equipment you have. So for as long as one helps the other, I'm actually all for it. Of course, as the game is not out yet and I didn't have access to any presentations, I cannot talk about performance in the raw gameplay, but we do know that Pearl Abyss is using their own engine called Black Space that is their latest next generation one, and by their own words, engine is designed for seamless open world and high fidelity real-time light, which I guess is important if you're gonna be making this. They've also released a video on GDC last year showcasing shallow water feature that, if turned on, really gives out these nice waves which go with a very satisfying water simulation over objects. Also, they will have volumetric fog with the fluid simulation, as for example we see a cliff who moves around, we see particles dissipating around him, alongside hair and cloth simulation. But throughout gameplay we've also seen that, let's say, if you destroy a tent, that cloth disappears after a while, which makes sense to save on resources and not to hog systems, lowering performance, because once you have these like simulations and you have a bunch of, like, let's say, different cloth around you going crazy, that can lower frame rate. So after a while, if it disappears and it actually helps the frame rate, that's totally fine for me. Alongside the usual ray tracing features that makes light reflect naturally, giving brighter interiors as well. Now, I'm kind of seeing like that without ray tracing things can be a little bit on the darker side when it comes to these tones, so hopefully that's going to be okay for people who don't maybe have like let's say PCs or whatever that can handle this. But having a proper way to bounce off different materials and objects with ray tracing is also a very nice addition, and honestly it looks good. I think for them, having their own engine that is designed for a game of this scale was important, but again, look, I haven't played the title, and the best testament to this will be once the game is fully out. I mean, I'm not sure by the time I'm writing this video that they have shown actual console footage. I think most so far was with PC, but if some gameplay did come out by the time this video is out, please let me know down below in the comments, because I'm very interested. So far on Steam it will require a minimum of Ryzen 5 2600X or i5 8500 with 16 GB of RAM and RX 6500 or the GTX 1060, with recommended options being Ryzen 5 5600 or the i5 11600K. Same with the amount of RAM for 16 gigs as it was for a minimum, but for GPU you will need the RX 6700 XT or the RTX 2080 from Nvidia. Honestly, so far kinda okay. when it comes to this, but again, you know, optimization on release is going to tell us a lot. But also please keep in mind that games like this one, and to be honest most games, especially open world ones in the past 4 or 5 years, require an SSD to run well. Even though they say here, like, look, SSD is required because there is no way an HDD, now pretty much outdated storage solution for games, will not be able to give you good performance at all, especially when it comes to just loading stuff around you. So for this game and, you know, a bunch of games in the past, you must have an SSD. But as I said, we will see once this is out how it goes with performance. Right now I can just speculate. Now a big discussion I've seen, you know, for the past like what, a few months now online is when people look at all of this. They say, there must be a catch. You know, having all of these things, all of these features, everything looks amazing. There must be something wrong. Well, I mean, from the gameplay feature standpoint, having, you know, this flashy fighting and just different puzzle solving elements or enemies like this or traversal is not really something we haven't seen so far, and I don't see a reason why they cannot pull this off. I mean, the most important part will be how they handle a level of detail in the background, which I'm sure they thought about a lot, and even in the past one of the developers was saying that I think for him grass was one of the most difficult things to do, because rendering grass on like large distances is incredibly difficult, and even if you can do it, it can be very hardware taxing, so you really have to be careful around it. Now also, when you have a game this huge, there has to be some bugs. I mean, look, for as long as the initial release is smooth with some bugs here and there, I don't really see a problem with it. That's the reason why they went with their own engine. I mean, if you make an engine or fork your own like previous engine from BDO and design it specifically for the type of game you want to make, for me that sounds promising. So I really do wish them, you know, the best for this, and I'm looking forward to all of this. And on Steam, look, it went over 3 million wishlists. So yeah, this is shaping up to be one of the biggest releases this year, besides, you know, stuff we already had like Resident Evil 9 Requiem and Slay the Spire 2, which were doing huge numbers. And on top of that, if GTA 6 does come out by the end of 2026 as they announced it, you know, these are going to be wild titles, lots to cover and lots to play. Different regions and biomes alongside grand boss fights and combat make this incredibly luring title, so no wonder people are excited. So expect a lot of coverage from me once this is out, and of course I will be going into different details and just stuff I'm going to discover and talk about. And for now, that's all I have. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more. Check us out on Twitter and Discord, and huge thanks to my Patreon supporters. This is LKM signing out, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye bye.